being a playoff team, turning things around, even getting back to 500. Probably not in the cards at this point for the 2025 Orioles. So what should constitute success for this team down the stretch? We'll answer that and many more questions coming up on this live mailbag episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, August 7th, 2025. And if you're listening on audio, it is Friday, August 8th, 2025. And welcome back into a live mailbag episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, well, we are just answering questions from you, the listeners, and you, the viewers. Going to be here for 30 or 40 minutes, just answering your questions. We'll talk about everything you may want to know about this Orioles team as we go down the stretch. They're 52-63. They sold at the deadline. They are clearly out of it, but they're still trying to compete next year. So where do they thread the needle down the stretch? Got plenty of questions brought in via email that I'll get to, but if you are joining us live here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channels, thank you so much. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe while you are here, but throw your Orioles questions right in the YouTube chat feature, and I will get to most, hopefully, if not all, of those live questions, and that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So we're going to dive right into it with the mailbag questions and jump into the first few that are here in the YouTube chat. Thanks to you all who jumped in even earlier before this live stream started to get your questions in. We're going to start with one from Jeff here who says, I'm not too far from Frederick, so I was excited to hear about the Keys return to High A. Sorry, Aberdeen, as that news became official on Friday as the Orioles High A affiliate will move from the Aberdeen Ironbirds back to becoming the Frederick Keys starting in 2026. Jeff says, what players do you think would be most exciting to watch play there next year? And Jeff, in terms of early in the year, like who will be in Frederick from day one opening day, it's probably going to be the majority of the college draft picks from the 2025 class. So we are talking about Ike Irish, the Orioles first round pick. We are talking about Vahiba Aloy and Caden Bodine, two of their compensation round picks. We're talking about some of the pitchers like Joseph Jurwa and JT Ginn, some of the higher ranked pitchers that they took earlier in the draft. Those are the type of guys that are going to be there to begin the season. Now, the Orioles' goal is that all of those guys advance to Double-A at some point in 2026, but there's a good chance we see those guys in Delmarva at some point soon, then maybe ending this season at Aberdeen and starting next year at Frederick. So it's going to be an exciting group of hitters and a lot of those arms that came in the draft, right? All those arms the Orioles took on day 2 of the draft, they're probably going to be there as well. In terms of guys they got back in trades, like, a Wellington Aracena who just made his first start with Aberdeen on Wednesday night. There's a chance he could start next year in Double-A, but he still could be in that rotation to begin the year. Potentially an Esteban Mejia could be someone really exciting. The just dynamite teenage Orioles pitcher who's throwing 101 miles per hour in Delmarva right now. He probably begins the year in what will be High A Frederick next season. So it's going to be some cool players that are going to be there. Question from Jim here, who also sent a similar one via email, but I'll take it from the YouTube chat here. Is Basallo's bat too good to risk at catcher, especially with his recent injuries? Wouldn't he and Coby Mayo be a great tandem at first base? Jim, it is an interesting question kind of surrounding where Samuel Basallo plays when he gets to the big leagues. Now, my prediction continues to be that he will be a September 1st roster expansion call-up for this Orioles team, and he will be on the roster for the final month of the season, and will have an inside track to make the opening day roster in 2026. But I don't think he's going to catch a lot in the big leagues this year. Now, he's caught more and more as the season's gone on, but just hasn't caught that much in AAA. Also, first of all, he's only 20, so he hasn't caught that much in general because he's 20 years old. but also because of the hamstring and the elbow injuries he suffered at times in 2025, the O's have resorted to a lot of DH and first base for Basallo, and he's actually gotten really good defensively at first base, which is a plus, and he still has improved as a defensive catcher. He's still not where you want him to be, but he has gotten better this year, and those are all good things for Basallo. My prediction for Basallo is that when he's on the roster, the Orioles more times than not will carry a third catcher along with Basallo and Adley Rutschman for the next couple of years. Alex Jackson right now is making a play to be that third catcher. I think eventually there could be a really cool triplet of catchers for the Orioles. Maybe in 2027, we see Adley Rutschman, Samuel Basallo, and Ike Irish all on this Orioles team, all with the ability to catch, but maybe Rutschman catching 4 times a week, Basallo once or twice, and Irish twice, and then Irish plays some right field and DH. Basallo plays some first base and DH. Maybe Adley DHs a little bit. They kind of rotate around, and they have this incredible catching group that's never been seen before on a big league roster. But for next year, this offseason is going to be critical for Basallo. If he can get where the Orioles need him to be defensively, they could carry just him and Adley. There's a chance they would also carry a third catcher like an Alex Jackson to give him some backup, and Basallo would, play more DH and more first base next season. But you think about first base, like you're going to have Coby Mayo there. You would think we'll see if Ryan Mountcastle is a part of the fold. Like most likely he'll return to the team this weekend against the A's. So we'll see how they fit him in with Mayo there, but without Basallo. And then when Basallo would get here, it's an even bigger question of what they would do. I still think they move on from Mountcastle this offseason, so maybe he's not part of that conversation. Then you have a guy like Tyler O'Neill who's going to be part of the DH mix up next year, so that's something to consider. I don't think Samuel Basallo will ever be a full-time 5 to 6 days a week catcher at the big league level, but I don't think they're going to step away from it. The way that they mitigate the injury risk is he's catching twice a week, DHing some, playing first base, and eventually that's how he's in the lineup every day, just kind of moving around a little bit. Another question from Jim here. Would you offer Trevor Rogers an extension right now? And if so, what terms? I got to be honest, Jim, it would be an incredibly funny bit for the first extension given out by the Miss Mike Elias front office to be Trevor Rogers, the trade from last year's deadline that everybody thought was the worst trade in human history. And even with Kyle Stowers being an all-star, Trevor Rogers has been the best starter in Major League Baseball basically for the last 2 months and change. And he still has another year of control through 2026. If you could get Trevor Rogers to basically sign through 2029, right? So you have next year and then you tack on 3 more years. And maybe you even give him a little more money next year in arbitration. So it's a 4-year extension that maybe buys out his final year of arbitration next year. And then the final 3 years on the deal are, 3 years, 60, 3 years, 65 million, maybe up to 3 years, 70 million on top of that. Like I absolutely give that to Trevor Rogers. Again, I know it's only 10 starts that he's looked this good, basically in the last 4 years since his awesome rookie season in Miami in 2021. But you got to spend on pitching somewhere. And this seems like a guy you already have in the system. You've already turned his career around. He's still only 28 years old, or 27 years old, excuse me. Like this could be a good investment for the Orioles. Milo with a question here. Any updates on Heston Kjerstad? Tony Mansolino sounded pretty ominous. Yeah, Milo, unfortunately, I don't have any updates further than what Mansolino said the other day about Heston Kjerstad, but it was not a great quote from Tony Mansolino. Here's the quote again. So Heston Kjerstad, he's been on the AAA injured list for a couple of weeks now. Remember, he went down to AAA because he was struggling so much. His offensive numbers ended up being even worse in Norfolk when he went down. Now, some of that you'd think because he's working on things and not exactly just focusing on getting hits every time he goes up there. But he's been on the IL for a couple of weeks, what the Orioles are calling like general fatigue. And Tony Mansolino was asked about it on Tuesday. And his quote was, quote, "I'm not ready to share yet, but we will talk it over and we'll figure out what to share with you guys, but nothing yet." Now, maybe that could just be there, protecting the privacy, a little bit of Kjerstad, letting him work through something. But you think about a guy who's gone through everything he has gone through, the myocarditis he dealt with when his pro career started and everything it took to get back from that. And then you have the couple of injuries sustained and the big concussion that kept him out, kept coming back and basically wiped away a lot of his 2024 season. All of that combined with the struggles this year, he has been through a lot. I really hope it is nothing stemming from either the myocarditis or the concussion symptoms. Like that is not where you want to be. So wishing the best for Heston Kjerstad, of course. Like, I'd love for him to get back to the level we know he can be at, be back in the big leagues and produce for the Orioles. But even below that, just want this guy to be able to live a healthy life. And he's had a tough run here. So yeah, unfortunately, no updates. Hopefully the next one we get is a positive one. Joshua with a question here. Hey, Connor, what are the odds we see Jud Fabian up here in the next few weeks? Feel like there's more to see from him than Dylan Carlson, especially with him being back and healthy now in Norfolk. Yeah, Fabian was out for a bit with a wrist injury in Norfolk. He returned last week. He actually homered, I believe, earlier today for the Tides. They had a day game that they won 9-8 down in AAA. The issue for Fabian, I think, is that Dylan Beavers is going to come up first, right? And the Orioles, they have an outfield opening, you would think, at the moment. I mean, there's not a lot of big-time names. I mean, Vidal Brujan is your bench outfielder right now. You can easily replace him with Dylan Beavers. They're going to wait on Beavers, right? They're going to wait till beyond about August 15th so he doesn't spend the required time on the big league roster or get the amount of at-bats that would allow him to lose his rookie status for 2026. And the Orioles miss out on a chance to get an extra draft pick. At this point, it's annoying, but it's worth it for the Orioles to do that. You could argue, hey, Jud Fabian's not going to get him a draft pick. Why not just call up Fabian now for a little bit while you don't have Beavers and at least give the Orioles fans something to see? I understand that point of view. I just think Fabian, in terms of talent, prospect status, everything is behind Beavers. Beavers is going to get the first call. I do think it would take an injury for Fabian to get a serious run in the big leagues this year. It's not impossible. And it's a really interesting spot with Dylan Carlson because he has been, he had a little hot streak there, but he's been playing every day and been really struggling at the plate. He's playing a solid center field. He can play all three positions out there, but he is struggling at the plate right now, is Dylan Carlson. And Carlson's still young, right? He's still in his mid-20s, and he's a guy who could be a really good fourth outfielder for you for years to come. I mean, he was a good big leaguer. He was a great prospect. There's still plenty left in Dylan Carlson. But it's all about how the Orioles view Carlson right now. If they view him as still a future player who's still young and they can get more out of him, they're going to continue to play him. If they view Carlson as just kind of the one-year stopgap he was signed to be and they're not going to bring him back next year, then Fabian, I think, has more of a shot. I think they believe Carlson can give them something next year, which makes it harder for Fabian. Now, it's an interesting spot because Fabian is 40-man or Rule 5 eligible this offseason, and you'd like to get a look at him. I just don't know if that's going to come for him at this point. Ben with a question. I just talked about it. When do you anticipate Samuel Basallo and Dylan Beavers will be promoted? For Dylan Beavers, again, they're going to wait. It's right around August 15th because of the rules in terms of rookie eligibility. You want to save that for these guys next year because you're out of it this year. If they maintain their rookie eligibility, you put them on the opening day roster and they win Rookie of the Year next year, they could get you a draft pick. So obviously Basallo is the most likely one to do that. But it's possible for Dylan Beavers as well. And as I mentioned earlier this week on the show, who would have thought after his 2023 season that Colton Cowser would have the full rookie year he did in 2024? And yet, we thought Jackson Holliday was the slam dunk guy to get them the draft pick last year. Turned out to be Cowser. And although he finished second, he should have won the AL Rookie of the Year award last year and got the O as a pick. Feels like Basallo and Beavers, very similar situation to what it was Holliday and Cowser. So I wouldn't rule out that Beavers could do that as well, especially with how well he is playing in AAA. I think what the Orioles will probably do is I would target August 21st because it is cool to just call up a player like that when you're back at home. So the O's play a homestand that starts tonight and ends on Thursday, the 14th against the Mariners. Then they go to Houston and Boston, and they come back Thursday, August 21st against the Astros. That would be my prediction for Beavers. And then my prediction for Basallo, just to get him some more catching innings in AAA, would be that when the rosters expand by 2 players on September 1st, that is when we see Basallo come up and join the Orioles. So we're going to take a pause right there and take a break. When we come back, going to dive into the Locked On Orioles email, grab a couple of questions from there, and then continue right back into the YouTube chat. So make sure you're putting your questions in there, and we'll get to those answers coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. And Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. prices on the app, they actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. And Gametime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for exciting upcoming Orioles games like tonight against the A's. I will be there in attendance, and I bought my tickets on Gametime, and you can too if you want to come watch the O's and maybe come say hello as well. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So we're back here on a live mailbag edition of the Locked On Orioles podcast. Thank you everyone so much for joining us here live on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe while you're here. Continue to put those mailbag questions right here in the YouTube chat. We will try to get to as many of them as possible while I am live. But I do want to shout out to the people who sent their questions via email. Remember, you can always email mailbag questions, or if you just want to talk O's, you can always hit me up, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. And I want to get to a few of those email questions as well. So let's begin with one from Darius. Darius wrote a longer email, but I'll read kind of the gist of it here. It's assumed next season would be make or break for Mike Elias and company, another disappointing season, and he could be gone. Would it actually be in the best interest of the Orioles if they let him go at the end of this season? An incoming GM with this core group of players, this farm, a newer owner with money and the ability to hire their own general manager and manager is rare to find and would be extremely attractive. The O's would likely have to have quite the candidate pool if that is the case. And plus, if Elias is fired after next year, then you're going into Adley's contract year in 2027, already a manager in place who is hired. It becomes just a stickier situation. So Darius basically asking the question of, could it make more sense for the Orioles if they're worried that Elias could get fired at some point next year, if 2026 goes off the rails, would it make more sense to let go of him at the end of this season? I think it's not impossible, right? I'm not saying it's a 0% chance that that would happen. What I see from this situation is basically two things. One is the Orioles allowed Mike Elias to execute this draft and this trade deadline. Now, to be fair, the best two things he's done as Orioles GM are draft and be a seller at the trade deadline. He has always been successful when doing those two things. So you could argue, Connor, they let him do his best thing one more time, and then they let him go, bring in a new GM who can handle the offseason and free agency, which is something that he struggled with at times. I would completely understand that argument and get where you're coming from. The reason why I don't think they'll do it, let go of Elias, and the reason why I wouldn't do it at this moment is because I think everyone, including him, deserves a chance to rebound. 2025 is basically the first year where the Orioles truly for a season underperformed what the expectation was for this team, right? Elias comes in November of 2018. He makes it very clear. We're stripping this thing down to the studs. We're revamping everything in this organization and going from there. It's a true rebuild. So 2019, 2020, 2021, when they're awful, pretty much expected to be awful. And honestly, coming into 2022, it looked like they would be slightly better because you thought there was a chance that both Adley and Gunnar would debut that year and maybe even Grayson. So you're like, this team's going to be better. But I don't think anyone thought the 2022 Orioles going into the season would be in the playoff race. And then they made the strides they did and finished 4 games over 500. And if not for, kind of falling apart a little bit in September, they were right in that race. So then it's like, all right, the Orioles are maybe the plucky pick to be a wild card team for 2023, right? I think maybe they can get to 88, 89 wins and, sneak into the playoffs for the first time under Elias. They win 101 games and win the AL East. You could argue 2024 was a disappointment, but at the end of the day, they still won 90 plus games and made the postseason. That's not anything to turn your nose up at. So this year, many thought it could be a similar year to 2024, and they have just collapsed in their 11 games under 500 here in early August. I don't think the one mishap season should fire a GM who, whether you like him or not, has done a lot of good for this organization so far. Now, if Elias has a disappointing offseason and the Orioles have a disappointing first 2 months of 2026, I'm totally fine to pull the plug. If you want to allow him to draft and trade at next year's deadline and then pull the plug, that's fine with me too if things are going poorly. But I'm thinking and hoping he has learned from his mistakes, and I think he deserves another chance to do this. Again, if he doesn't do well with that chance, that is where things can very, very, very much change with what Elias's situation is at the moment. But I will say I'd give him another chance here. Another email coming in from Andrew says, for my question, in my eyes, last offseason was a pretty big disappointment. What philosophical and strategic changes would you like to see or expect to see from the front office this offseason? This kind of doubles with the Darius question, so I wanted to take this one next. I think for Elias to keep his job beyond 2026, which is what you would at least assume he wants to do and the Orioles want him to do, they need to spend, period. I mean, they did up the payroll a lot last offseason, but they need to be aggressive on pitching. And here is the main thing that needs to change. I am not arguing with Elias in terms of how he feels about paying long-term for starting pitching. It's how most teams in baseball feel. It's not a good investment. Guys get injured, contracts look bad. All the data pretty much supports that take. However, almost all of the good teams in Major League Baseball have starting pitchers on their payroll that they are paying a lot of money and probably too much money, but those players are also helping them get to where they are, right? You just go through the list of guys and teams, and there's only going to be a few like Milwaukee and maybe the Tigers that really aren't like overpaying a pitcher right now and yet are in good position this season. And especially when you're the Orioles and you don't have the pitching development that Milwaukee has had, or you don't have a cost-controlled Tarek Skubal best pitcher in the world like the Tigers have, you're not in a position to do what those teams have done. You just need to spend on or be willing to trade for pitching. And they've been willing to trade for it, right? I mean, getting Zach Eflin, getting Trevor Rogers, getting Corbin Burnes, those have been slam dunk trades for starting pitchers. They need to do more. You need to go for the higher level. If you want to make a Corbin Burnes type move again, that's great, but it can't be another guy who's only here for 1 year because then he's going to walk in free agency and you got to do it all over again. You got to at least go for somebody. It's going to cost more. You got to go for somebody with at least a couple of years of control, like an Edward Cabrera type that's going to be around for a little bit longer, or pay your guys like a Trevor Rogers, or go and get these guys. I think someone like a Framber Valdez or a Michael King or a Dylan Cease just has to be signed by the Orioles. Whatever, if it takes 4, 5, 6 years, at least one of them, and then you can do the other one via trade. That's the big thing that just absolutely has to change for the Orioles this offseason. Question from Robert via email: with Coby Mayo's recent positive run at the plate, where do you think he plays in the future? Do they trust him to play first and be a 15 to 20 home run type of player, or do they try him in right field and hope to spend bigger money on a bigger name at first base? Robert, I have been down. This is something Eric Longenhagen at Fangraphs has talked about for a while, that he thinks the Orioles should try Coby Mayo in right field. And I tend to agree with him because for a while that was a spot he would fit better on the roster than third or first base. He fits a little better at first base now with Ryan O'Hearn out of the picture and Ryan Mountcastle probably on his way out as well. But you still might want to have some Samuel Basallo at bats at first base. And there's some openings in the outfield. I just think it's not completely too late, but probably pushing on too late to make that move to the outfield for Mayo. I think he's a first baseman who plays some emergency third base if you need to. And I think if Mountcastle is gone, which I think is the probability this offseason, I think between Mayo and Basallo doing some catching and DHing as well, that Coby Mayo can kind of stick there mostly at first base. And if he's going to hit like a first baseman can, Robert, he's got way more power than just being a 15 to 20 homer guy. This is a 30 home run type of player, the bat that he has. Now, average and strikeout rate, we'll see what he does, but power-wise, it's easily 30-plus home run power in a full big league season. I think he can stick there at first base, and I think the Orioles roster will now kind of allow him to do that as they head into 2026. Matthew with a question via email here. So with the new CBA having the lottery for the draft and preventing teams from getting high picks in consecutive years, can you break down what the Orioles are looking at in terms of the Orioles odds to get the number 1 draft pick or a top 5 pick? Good question from Matthew. So with the new draft rules that came into the CBA a couple of years ago, basically how it works is that the bottom 18 teams, so the 18 teams that don't make the postseason, are entered in a lottery, and the top 6 picks in the draft are based on a lottery. But you can't just keep tanking and getting high picks in the draft. There's a way that they have kind of tried to stop that. If you are a revenue sharing team, you can't have more than 2 consecutive years in the top 5. And if you aren't revenue sharing, you can't have more than 1 year consecutively picking in the top 5. And if you do so, you are banned from picking in the top 10 in the years beyond that. So if you look at Tankathon, great website to kind of get live updates on draft position. If you look at Tankathon, the Orioles in terms of record, they have what, the 6th, 7th, they have the 7th worst record in baseball right now, but they're set to get the number 5 pick at the moment because the Rockies and Nationals are both barred from having a pick any higher than 10th this season because of how recently and frequently they have drafted in the top 5. So the Orioles, if they ended the season right in this spot, which would be having the 5th best odds to get the number 1 pick, their odds would be set at 10% to end up with the number 1 pick. And there's a good chance they would end up drafting in that lottery and in the top 6. So I'd say chances honestly pretty solid to be in the top 5. And I mean, 10% is pretty good to feel like you could potentially get the number 1 pick in next year's draft. Next question is from Brian. What's going on with Colton Cowser this year? Do you think he'll get back on track, or have we seen his peak? Is he a future center fielder, or is he locked into left field? Colton Cowser's, it's been a weird year for him, right? He has the season he should have won Rookie of the Year last year. He comes in this year. He breaks his thumb in the 4th game. He misses 2 months. He comes back and he got really hot. If you remember that, when Cowser first came back in early June, he was scorching hot for about a month there. And then he just went ice cold in July. And it's kind of been that way ever since. Now, if you look at Cowser's underlying data, right? All the metrics in terms of what's going on with his swing and his approach, the hard hit rate is down, but by less than 0.5%. Like his average exit velocity is actually up. His barrel rate is down by about 3%. So he is hitting the ball on the ground a little bit too often. That's one of the issues, but he's not swinging and missing as much this season. Like he's still making solid contact. It's just that a little too much of it is on the ground. Now, John Mioli had a good article in the Baltimore Banner on Thursday that you should go check out. He talked to Cowser, and Cowser talked a lot about his struggles with his approach this year since he's come back from the thumb injury, and he's been really trying to cut down on his strikeouts this season. Now, what's funny with that is that his strikeout percentage is actually up about 1.5 percentile, but his swing and miss overall is down. And that's really the thing you're trying to do, is swing and miss less. But he's saying he's getting into a weird habit where he's trying to avoid getting in 2 strikes. So maybe he's swinging at worse pitches. His walk rate is down over 3%. That's something he was always known for doing. It's now a below average walk rate. I think that's the biggest thing. I think that he's got to get the walks up. The contact quality is still there, but it's going to be an important 2 months. In terms of his position, Tony Mansolino has said that they're going to keep him in left field for now this season so he can focus on a position he knows well, and it gives him more time to focus on getting the bat back. I do think long-term, at least for next year, he's going to be the Orioles center fielder because Enrique Bradfield Jr. is just not ready yet. Cedric Mullins is gone, and I'm not sure the Orioles are going to bring in someone who's like an everyday type center fielder in free agency this offseason, unless they would maybe trade for a Luis Robert, which would be kind of cool if he can turn himself around. But I do think Cowser has the ability to play center field every day. I'd like to see him in that position down the stretch, but I kind of understand what Mansolino's saying about let him kind of focus on this for now. I don't think he's peaked. He is 25. There are good years ahead of him, but as I talked about on yesterday's episode, you want to see Colton Cowser start to turn things around here at the end part of this season. Brett with a question here. Wanted to get your thoughts on turning Grayson Rodriguez into a closer. Kind of talks about the issues with Grayson's injuries and how his stuff could play up in the bullpen, and says he could see Chase McDermott doing that as well. I've talked about McDermott already. The move to the bullpen is already happening in AAA right now. He's close to the big leagues. Now, Grayson Rodriguez, it was a disaster season. Lost season. He's missed the whole year. He's now getting debridement surgery in his elbow to clean up some bone chips. He is going to miss the entirety of this year now. The Orioles are saying that he should be good for spring training 2026, and we'll kind of see where his health is in February in Sarasota. But At this point, there's a lot of questions about Grayson's health. Now, anybody, just maybe dumbest take in the world that we've seen a lot of bad ones recently, but maybe the worst one is Grayson's a bust. Trade him, give up on him. Grayson Rodriguez is 25 years old, okay? He's been in the big leagues since 2023. He has some of the best stuff of any starting pitcher in baseball. And why would you trade someone who's got this much potential when he is at his lowest value of his career? Little critical thinking. None of that makes sense. What does make sense is Grayson Rodriguez is signed through 2029. You're going to try to get every ounce of talent out of him. If that means moving him to the bullpen next year to try and fix these injury issues he's having, I don't think it's completely out of the question for the Orioles to do something like that. And someone I am comparing him to, this is going to be kind of a loose comparison, but bear with me here, is Jorge Lopez. Now, Jorge Lopez did not have the major league success as a starter like Grayson has, right? Even with his injuries, Grayson had a 4.35 ERA and a 3.93 FIP in 2023. He had a 3.86 ERA with a 3.66 FIP in 2024 when he was healthy as a starter. Jorge Lopez never had numbers close to that as a starting pitcher in the big leagues in his time with Kansas City and with Milwaukee or with the Orioles. When the O's claimed him on waivers in 2020, they put him in the rotation. He had a 6.34 ERA. He spent most of 2021 in the rotation. He had a 6 ERA. Then they moved him to the bullpen at the end of that year. And what did he do the next season? Have a 1.68 ERA out of the pen. Walks went down. Strikeouts went up. He made the All-Star team. The Orioles dealt him at the deadline. What got them back in? Your Cano and K. Povich. Lopez had that kind of elite stuff as a starter that Grayson Rodriguez has. If you look at Jorge Lopez, the stuff he had when he came over to the Orioles in 2021, when the O's made their tweaks with him as a starter, he had a 100 stuff plus. That's the number that's purely what is the ball doing out of your hand, movement, arm angle, velocity, all that stuff coming together. How nasty is it, right? Doesn't take into account location. It's how nasty is it? 100 is pretty good for a starting pitcher. It's not nearly as good for a reliever, but pretty good for a starting pitcher. When he went to the bullpen the next year, the Orioles had him at a 117 stuff plus. That is a giant step up. His slider got way better. His sinker got better. His curveball got better. His changeup got better. Like, it was wild to see what he was able to do. You look at Grayson Rodriguez's starting point from a stuff perspective purely. When he was healthier in 2023, he peaked at a 113 stuff plus as a starter. Now, Lopez added 17 points. That's not perfect math, but if Grayson did go to the bullpen and throw up a 130 stuff plus, that would lead all pitchers in baseball. Ryan Helsley at 128 has the best stuff plus number in Major League Baseball this year. It is possible that with that fastball, changeup, breaking ball combination, Grayson Rodriguez could be one of the nastiest relievers in the major leagues. What the Orioles would have to weigh there is, are we giving up on him too early as a starter? Would he be able to buy into being a reliever next year, getting healthier, and then maybe going back to the rotation in 2027? How many starting pitchers are we willing to bring in to make it okay that even a healthy Grayson pitches out of the bullpen? Those are all things they have to consider, but it could work maybe even for a year if they wanted to try and end some of these injury issues. Alex with a question here. Should we expect Cade Povich or Brandon Young to become the next Dean Kramer for this rotation, where he holds down the back end of the rotation for years down the road with a similar ceiling? And if that's the case, does it increase the chance of an offseason trade of Dean Kramer for a better arm? Alex, I wouldn't expect it yet from Povich or Young. They still have a ways to go. And I wouldn't sleep on how much Dean Kramer, how good he is, how much he means to this team. Povich or Young still have a ways to go to get to the Dean Kramer level. I think it's possible that when Dean Kramer is gone from this team, a guy like Povich or Young could slot into that rotation where you're like, this is the perfect 4 or 5 starter in a good rotation. And when your rotation's bad, he becomes your 2 starter, and that's not as ideal. But if he's your 4 or 5, you're feeling great about your rotation. And we hope that Povich and Young become the same thing. I think they're on a similar track as Kramer was, but they still have a ways to go. I think, don't sleep on how valuable Dean Kramer is to this team. And then a question from Eric, who went to the Delmarva game last night. and watched Boston Bateman pitch, who came over for the trade deadline. Also watched Nate George, 16th round pick of the Orioles out of high school in 2024, and said Nate George is the most entertaining player on the field. The kid plays with his hair on fire, covered huge ground out in center, got to a ball nobody thought he would catch, stole a few bags, and got a great break on a steal of home, and ended up causing a pitcher to balk and the run to score. Can he fly up the ranks as fast as he tracks fly balls? Eric, Nate George is the Energizer Bunny of this Orioles system. He absolutely does play with his hair on fire. It's incredible to watch. If you have a second, watch some MILB TV this week and watch Nate George in Delmarva. It is unbelievable what he can do. I think there's pretty much no doubt he's going to end this season in Aberdeen. And then the sky's the limit, right? You hope you see him in Double-A next year. And if he's hitting like the way he is, he's mashing the baseball and playing like, it's not insane to think by the end of 2027, maybe the middle of 2027, Nate George could be a big leaguer. Like, these guys who are so advanced at this age and are so fierce and just create so much havoc are valuable to big league teams, and they're valuable the younger and healthier their bodies are. And this is a guy who might have some injury issues with how hard he plays, might be better for this team to get him to the big league sooner. So in 2027, if Nate George is wearing an Orioles uniform in Baltimore, that would not surprise me at all. He could rise very, very quickly. We're going to take one more break, and then we're jumping back into the YouTube comments, right? I'm going to try to get to all these questions. Keep sending them in here. Going to take a break, come back, and get to more mailbag questions here on this live episode. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up. The greatest preseason team in football history, the Baltimore Ravens, are playing as I speak, I believe. Let's see. They're winning 21-9. It's the preseason. Why would the Ravens not be winning? But college football isn't far behind, and it's the perfect time to lock in your season-long more or less picks for the 2025 football season, all before week one kicks off. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the game. When I go to the PrizePicks apps, I just search Lamar Jackson. Whatever it is, unless it's interceptions or turnovers, I'm selecting more, whether it's the touchdown number, total yards number, passing yards number, whatever it is, I'm taking more all the time on Lamar Jackson. And the flex play option is a total game changer. Even when one of your picks misses, you still double your money. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineup after you play your first $5 play. That's at PrizePicks. Run your game. So thank you all again for joining us for this live Locked On Orioles mailbag episode here on a Thursday evening. Orioles with the off day here before they take on the A's starting on Friday, and got to all of the mailbag questions. Again, thank you all so much for sending those in. Let's jump back into the YouTube questions here. Let's see. B-Man with a question. Lots of starting pitching talent in Double-A. Any of them you think make it Triple-A this year and compete for an O's spot in 2026? Now, the first name I would have said on this list a couple of weeks ago is Braxton Bragg. He had been incredible in Double-A, then he got Tommy John surgery. So maybe that one's not happening. However, I will give you two names where it is a serious, serious possibility. And those two names are Trey Gibson and Nestor Herman. Trey Gibson, who was an undrafted free agent a couple of years ago by the Orioles in 2023. He started this year in Aberdeen. He went to Double-A, 9 starts in Double-A. He's got a 1.75 ERA. He struck out 59 batters and walked 18 in 46 innings. This is a guy who I think should be in Triple-A soon, even though it's only been 9 Double-A starts. And the other guy for me would be Nestor Herman, 11th round pick in 2023, also began the year in Aberdeen, 13 starts in Double-A. He's got a 4.12 ERA, but it's 69 strikeouts, 22 walks, and 63 innings. Gibson more likely than Herman, but I think they both have a chance to be in Triple-A. And honestly, both of them, and then I would also include Levi Wells, but maybe more as a reliever long-term, could be in play for the Orioles in 2026. These are very, very exciting pitching prospects that could be here sooner than you think. Adit with a question here. What's more likely? They sign Dylan Cease or trade for Pablo Lopez or Mitch Keller in the offseason? I would say a trade for Lopez or Keller is more likely. I think A, because Both of those teams are going to be selling potentially more in the offseason, Lopez with the Twins and Keller with the Pirates. And while I love Dylan Cease, I think the Orioles will be turned off a little bit by just the very up and down nature he's had the past couple of years. I see them going more for a Framber Valdez or Ranger Suarez type who have been more very consistent and are left-handers in that rotation. And I think a trade for Pablo Lopez, who's the best, I think, of the three pitchers mentioned here, as long as he is healthy, I think is more likely. And Mitch Keller is just more cost-effective if they want to go that way as well. Walter with a question. You mentioned you think the Orioles will add an impact bat. What position are you thinking? I'm assuming Walter talks about in free agency this offseason. Kevin and Ben on the broadcast mentioned Cowser and Jackson were talking to Schwarber during batting practice in Philadelphia. Sounds awesome, but unsure of the fit. I would be in love with Kyle Schwarber in an Orioles uniform, but he is basically a full-time DH right now. He can play a little bit of corner outfield a couple of times a year if you absolutely need him to. It's not pretty out there, but he's going to DH, 140 plus games. That shuts down DH for potentially Basallo and Mayo and Rutschman and O'Neill to rotate through. Now, does the production Schwarber gives you, who already has 40 home runs this year, make up for that? It might, but I do worry about getting a full-time DH. It makes your roster construction really, really tough. If they sign Schwarber, I'm not going to be mad at all, but it does make it tough to kind of rotate through your roster. Other bats, Walter, to be honest, I'm not really sure about, but Schwarber is a guy who I would at least target and think about how that guy would kind of jump into the rotation. Yeah, Jane with more of a comment here, but just kind of clearing up the rookie rules. In Major League Baseball, a player is considered a rookie if they have not exceeded 130 at-bats, 50 innings pitched, or 45 days on the active roster. That's the August 15th-ish date. If you wait beyond then, they won't have played 45 days on the active roster. You can kind of limit the at-bats a little bit, and that's where it comes in, where they won't, for Basallo and Beavers, won't be rookies next year. Let's see. I'm getting a couple of free agency bat questions. I'm pretty tuned in on who the arms are for next year. But you know what? Let's pull up Spotrac and see what kind of bats we would go for. So to kind of combine Adit's question to go along with Chase's question here with what outfielder power bat would you like to see the Orioles go after in free agency? And I mean, obviously Kyle Tucker would be an incredible fit here. That might be outside of the Orioles price range. We will certainly see. Beyond that, in terms of the outfielders, it does kind of go down a little bit if you're even counting Schwarber as an outfielder. Someone like maybe a Lourdes Gurriel Jr. would potentially be interesting, although he hasn't been as good in Arizona this year. You're going to have Tyler O'Neill out there anyway. Like maybe you go for more of the first basey type. Maybe you go for a Pete Alonso or a Josh Naylor. It's not the greatest lineup of free agent bats this year, but some guys who could potentially fit in Baltimore. Adit with another question here. Do you see the Orioles offering $175+ million to one pitcher or 175 to 200 million combined contract value with 2 to 3 pitchers through free agency, trades, and extensions? Knowing the Orioles, it's more likely if they were going to spend $200 million, they'd spread it out between 3 pitchers. So I would say it's more likely the Orioles do that. But I would love to see them. If it took 175 to get Framber Valdez, I'm okay with that. But maybe instead it's extending Trevor Rogers and it's trading for Pablo Lopez. And then you're signing someone like, at that point, you're probably not paying the top of the market in terms of starting pitchers. So maybe you're signing, maybe a Zach Gallen on a bounce back type of year, right? Or maybe you're getting a Merrill Kelly on a 1-year deal to hope he can continue to do what he's been doing, which is still be a really, really good major league pitcher. Maybe you're bringing in a Griffin Canning, did the Mets kind of fix him? It's more so moves like that to go along with, maybe a Cabrera and a Lopez that really give you those top line kind of starting pitchers. Paul Rick with a question. Are you a card collector? I am not. Actually, recently, I'm looking right down to my left right now, and all my old baseball cards are sitting next to me. I got them from my parents' house. I went through them. I categorized them. I kept the Orioles ones. The other ones are up for grabs. If anyone ever wants some baseball cards, like seriously, send me an email, lockedOnOrioles@gmail.com. I will more than likely send you some baseball cards because I'm looking to get rid of all these baseball cards that I have. So I'm not really a card collector. I was when I was a kid. If you want some cards, you can definitely take some off of my hands. So Paul Rick, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. Let's make a little card transaction happen here. T. Jake with a question: who would be your ideal starting pitching signing this offseason? And who do you think the Orioles will end up signing or trading for? I think I've said his name a million times already. Framber Valdez. I would love Framber Valdez to be in an Orioles uniform. Left-hander, gets the strikeouts, is a ground ball pitcher, just like everything the Orioles would want. Plus, obviously, the connection with Mike Elias from Houston, just like bring him to Baltimore. Who do I think the Orioles will end up with? I think a Zach Gallen, like, prove-it deal is very possible. I think a Merrill Kelly type guy is very, very possible for this Orioles team. I think a Mitch Keller type trade is likely. I think they can maybe put the cards on the table for a Pablo Lopez. I think that's possible as well, but those are some of the names I am definitely looking at. Tom with a question here: with all the pitching injuries in the organization over the past 2 years, are they coincidental or is it organizational issue? Is the team considering making changes, how they work with pitchers? Tom, if you had asked this question about hitters and all the hamstring injuries they've suffered this year, I would say there might be something there. But you do have to look around Major League Baseball. Arm injuries is an absolute epidemic for professional pitchers, for amateur pitchers as well, just any baseball pitchers. It's been that way for well over a decade, close to 20 years at this point. Tommy John surgery after Tommy John surgery, no one has the answers. It's really not something the Orioles are doing versus other teams. Maybe they've been hit a little more by the injury bug than others this year. But in terms of just arm injuries in general, this has been pretty standard for what it is across the board. When you are throwing that hard at that high velocity with that high max effort every single pitch, the human arm is not made and human elbow is not made to withstand that. It's just not. And that's why they all get injured. Something has to change or it's just going to keep getting worse. It's just what's going on with the league. T. Jake with a love the Spurs jersey, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube. Yeah, this is a shout out to Sonaldo, who unfortunately, despite the terrible nature of having to watch Spurs tournament play excluded over the last year or two, Son was on the team when I started following Spurs, and that definitely became my favorite soccer player probably ever. So sad to see. It's cool that he's playing in the States, but sad to see him no longer on Spurs. So had to rep the jersey here. Ed with a question: what is Dylan Beavers' ceiling? Has he elevated himself to a top prospect? I don't know top prospect, but I will say friend of the show, Aram Layton, put out his newest top 100 prospect list last week. Guess who he had at number 100? Dylan Beavers. First time in a while, or maybe ever, I've seen Dylan Beavers be in any respectable prospect analyst top 100. He's rising up the ranks. Like his ceiling, a Nick Markakis type player, like that is completely possible for Dylan Beavers. If you can get that out of Dylan Beavers, like that is an unbelievable draft pick so far. SP Mags with a question: can we call Jackson Holliday's early career a disappointing start? Not that he won't get better, but I still hope for more than this. I think last year was disappointing. This year, he's basically been a league average hitter. And you got to remember, he is 21 years old. Most 21-year-olds just got drafted and are in low A right now. Jackson Holliday is in his second year in the big leagues, hitting leadoff, and has been a league average hitter. I think that's totally fine. Has he exceeded expectations? Not yet, but he's only 21. If all goes well for him, he's got 15 plus more years in the big leagues. I think this year has been totally fine. Last year, yes, a little disappointing. Can't argue that. This year, totally what you would expect out of a 21-year-old. DeO's man with a question: who are you high on out of this year's Orioles draft class? I mean, I love this class. I love Ike Irish, Vahiva Aloy as huge upside. I would say Colin Yeaman, the 4th round pick out of UC Irvine, the shortstop. He's a really underrated college player this year. And then my other pick to click from this class is Kalen Hampson, 8th round pick, Australian left-hander. They drafted out of the University of the Cumberlands. That's a small school in Kentucky. His stuff looked legit when I watched a little video on him. I think he could be a fast riser as a left-hander reliever in this system that I'm super, super excited about. Let's see. We've got some other kind of Grayson reliever type questions. We've kind of addressed that one already. Let's see if we've got any more questions. TJ Samuel with another one: are there any current minor league bats you would consider untouchable for trading this offseason besides Basallo? I would say I really do want to see what happens with Ike Irish. I would not deal him at this point. Otherwise, let it rip. I say this all the time. As a fan, I will allow you to have 3 players that you say are off the board in trades as prospects. For me, it's Samuel Basallo. It is Ike Irish, and God, it's probably Trey Gibson. I would have said Braxton Bragg, but he's getting Tommy John. He's not getting dealt right now. It's got to be Trey Gibson with how good he's been. Otherwise, if you're going to go get serious, legitimate, top-end starting pitching, do it. Go get it. We need it right now. Walter with a question. Speaking of extensions, are there any players that come to mind where their 2025 performance has done the most to increase or decrease your opinion on if the O's should extend them? Number 1 by far on the list. This guy is all the way up here, and everyone else in this conversation is 50 feet below. Trevor Rogers. The way he has looked, I'm extending Trevor Rogers right now. He's had the biggest increase. I would say an increase from Jordan Westburg as well. Even though he's had injury issues when he's been on the field, he's been red hot. I think he'd be a perfect player to extend. Colton Cowser's probably seen a little bit of a decrease this year. That's probably true. And then I think an obvious decrease candidate is Grayson Rodriguez, right? I was totally down for an extension. Now you just feel wary about that because of all the injuries. Danny with a question. What would you think if the Orioles signed Ranger Suarez this offseason? I would think very good job by the Orioles. Now, I don't think Ranger Suarez is a true number 1. But what Ranger Suarez has done, he's only 29 years old. He's a lefty. It's not big time stuff, right? He's throwing 90, 91 with his sinker, but it's changeups and breaking balls, and he's mixing speeds, and he's got incredible command. He's locating the ball wherever he wants to. He's on a great Phillies team. He's been incredible in the postseason in his career. And this is looking like his best season to date. He's got a 2.94 ERA in 17 starts this year. That would be a career low as a full-time starter. He had a great reliever as kind of a starter/reliever in 2021, but since then, since he's been in the rotation, I mean, I would like them to add another pitcher beyond him, but he would be an awesome add for this team. Let's see if we got any more questions here in the chat. I'm over 50 minutes on this one, so may not get to many more questions, but wanted to get to as many as possible. Let's see. Ben with another question here. What will the Orioles do with Ryan Mountcastle now that Coby Mayo is the first baseman of the future? Some people saying, hey, they should non-tender him, which is basically you let him loose of his final year of arbitration because he is signed through 2026. He'll probably make about $9-ish million next year through arbitration. I think he's a bounce back candidate where he's still not too expensive where another team would take a shot on him, right? If the White Sox were able to get something back for Andrew Vaughn after sending him down to AAA, the Orioles can get something back this offseason for a year of Ryan Mountcastle. I would just try my hardest to trade him. It would be weird if you don't non-tender him, you get to spring training, you weren't able to find a trade suitor. That would be an awkward situation for the team, but I do think they would be able to find someone to take him on. CJ021 says, hey, Connor, what is the worst rule in Major League Baseball? Number 1 that comes to mind is the running lane down the first baseline. You are supposed to run in the quote-unquote running lane, which is in foul territory. The base is in fair territory. Essentially, you are asked to run not in a direct line towards first base. Yet that is what you should be doing to get the quickest path to where you need to go. Guys get called out for obstruction when there's a little dribble in front of the plate. Catcher throws it, hits him in the back. Just put the double base out there. It's a white base in fair territory for the first baseman to stand on. It's an orange base in foul territory for the runner to run on. It gets away collisions and injuries and gets rid of that stupid rule. I can't believe they still haven't done it. They've done it in college. They've done it in softball. Like, grow up. It's the easiest change to make in the world. Good question, CJ. Should be a very, very easy answer for the dumbest rule in baseball. Let's see. We got some more questions kind of about free agency. Thomas with a question of the young core guys, who do you think is the most likely to receive a contract extension first? I would say most likely is Westburg. Who would it be if it were up to you? It would be Gunnar. He's the best player. But I think even with Westburg being a Boris client, I do think there is a really, really good chance he could get extended. Ed with a question here. You mentioned Yennier Cano in the bullpen next year. I can't agree. He's been bad and has blown so many games the past 2 years. Why do you still believe in him? Well, first I'll say, Ed, he's not as bad as you think. He's had some bad outings, which has ballooned his ERA and made you only remember the bad ones. He had a 3.15 ERA and a 3.55 FIP last year. His strikeouts were up from his all-star season. Like, he was still really, really good last year. This year, the walks are down, but the strikeouts are down. Home runs are up a little bit. His FIP is only up a tiny bit. Like, he's still avoiding a lot of fly balls. He's still having the ball hit on the ground. His stuff numbers, if you just look at the pure stuff, it is down from last season. That is concerning. The drop down has really been on his sinker mostly, and that is his bread and butter pitch. The reason why I believe in Cano is it's still above average stuff. He can still get guys out, and he's shown the ability to adapt in the past. When he went through his rough patch last year, he added the four-seamer, he added more sliders, and it changed him as a pitcher. He's willing to change. I think he can change again, absolutely, and that is why I still believe in him. We'll take the final question of the day via Walter. How much do you think the coaching staff changes in 2026? It's going to be interesting because there's a chance Tony Mansolino, who's the interim manager right now, would get the full-time job, but it's more likely they hire someone else from the outside, and that person might want to bring in a couple of people that he likes. You might shake up the other coaches. Some of the other coaches might want to go elsewhere if they're not being led by people that they were being led by while they were here. Like, there's going to be some changes. I think they should still keep a good chunk of this staff, but there will be a couple of changes, and I think obviously manager will be the big one. Thank you so much for your questions. Ready? If you have further questions, they didn't get answered, whatever it may be, email me, lockedOnOrioles@gmail.com. I'll get to them on the next mailbag episode. We haven't done a lot of mailbags this season. I'll do plenty more as this season continues, and of course into the off season as always. But thank you so much for your questions. Thank you so much for holding in. Not as long as our trade deadline live show from last week, but pushing towards an hour on this episode. Wanted to get to as many of your questions as possible. Orioles and Athletics start tonight, a 3-game series. I will be in the ballpark up in the 300 level behind home plate. Feel free to come by and say hello. I would love to say hi and talk some Orioles. It's JT Ginn versus Sugano tonight. It's Friday night at 7. It's Jack Perkins and Brandon Young on Saturday at 7, where they honor Adam Jones and induct him into the Orioles Hall of Fame. That's going to be an awesome scene. And then Sunday at 1:30, it's Cade Povich versus Luis Severino. The 51-66 Athletics. If the Orioles don't play well this weekend, the A's will jump them in the standings. You probably don't want that. So I'll be back Monday, recapping everything you need to know from the O's and A's series. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.